It doesn't, in fact, say Daytona anywhere on it.
Right. In that sense, it feels a little bit more special to me. But the look of it is classic Daytona.
It really is.
It's the pushers and the screw downs.
Everything's correct on that one. That is, yeah. Daniel, Dae Kim, welcome to Talking Watches.
It's good to be here.
It's one of those things, you hear about, or I should say I hear about, these people in Hollywood, entertainment, celebrity, that are really into watches. And I've heard about you, believe it or not, for about 4 or 5 years. Somebody said, did you know that Daniel Dae Kim is a serious watch guy? I was like, no, I did not know that. So I've actually been waiting to do this for the better part of a decade. I want you to know that.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, especially because I've been a fan of your site for so long. I mean, it is the premier site in the watch world. In a little way, I'm starstruck too.
That's very kind. So you've got some great watches here. Why don't you walk us through some of your earliest watches?
I should start with this one right here. This is a Seiko speed timer, and this is significant to me because this is actually the model of watch that my father wore when I was a young boy. He got this as a gift from my uncle. It was the early 70s, and he treasured this watch. I remember, even as a small boy, how much he loved it, and every night he had a ritual with this watch. He would take it in his hand like this and just start doing this. It was an automatic movement, but somehow he didn't trust that it would go through the night without it stopping. It was when I became aware of a watch as a timepiece. If you kind of take a look through all of my pieces since then, you'll see the influence visually of this piece in almost everything I own. So in a way, it's Rosebud.
That's amazing. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York City and outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 2nd or 3rd grade, my dad bought me my first watch, and it was a Seiko. And it was a quartz movement, and it was actually gold with a black dial. It's something that I would never wear today, but I loved that watch.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that it was a Seiko just like my dad's. It actually put Seiko in a very special place in my heart as I started collecting. And this piece, this Grand Seiko, the GMT, is an homage and a testament to that first piece that my dad bought. And I absolutely love this piece. The quality of workmanship in Grand Seiko, I think, rivals brands that are multiples in price. This dial, this deep green dial, is one that I think is as beautiful as anything else I own. And I also like this watch because when I wear it, it feels very under the radar. No one's kind of pointing it out. It's not a conversation piece, but the workmanship is superb and the movement is excellent.
Yeah, and I think in some ways the two watches directly next to the Seiko are kind of brethren. I mean, they're really functional tool watches.
This was one of the very first pieces I got when I started collecting, and that is the Speedmaster Ultraman, the original issue. To be honest, I didn't know how valuable that particular model was going to be. When I was a kid growing up in Philadelphia, Ultraman was on my TV every day.
Yeah.
And it was one of the only shows where I saw Asian faces.
Interesting.
And so I was a huge fan of that show.
Yeah.
And I remember Hayata pressing on his little button to turn into Ultraman. The light on his chest would beat when it was almost time for him to fly back to his planet. When Omega reissued it last year for the 50th anniversary, I was thinking, you know what? I don't know if I should get the second one. It will never be as good as the first, but I reached out to Reynald Eschliman, who has become a friend and one of my patron saints in the watch world. And I told him about my nostalgia for the Ultraman, and he arranged somehow for me to be able to purchase a new one. There's that connection to my childhood, and this was my first real watch, my first serious watch. And this is a Rolex 16200, and this was given to me by my wife's family when we got engaged. There's a tradition in Korean custom that when a couple gets engaged, the family of the wife gives a watch to the son of the other family. And so this watch was the one that I received, and this was back in 1991. And I remember treasuring this piece so much because of what it represented. And at the time, the trend was to get two-tone pieces, like the Jubilee bracelets with the two-tone pieces. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who said, get something stainless. Just get something stainless, it's gonna be timeless.
That's a good friend.
And he was absolutely right. So from there, I bought things like this blueberry, which I absolutely love. But
Yeah.
I recently heard a story about blueberries that I'd love for you to confirm. I heard that there are no such thing as original blueberries from Rolex.
That is nobody knows for sure. So there's been a few guests on our series here, at least two, actually three, that own blueberry bezel GMTs. One of them was told by Rolex USA that his blueberry bezel was not correct. An assumption was made that all blueberry bezels were not correct. I've heard that as well from some pretty reputable sources. I also know some pretty reputable sources that sell blueberry watches all the time. To be totally honest with you, and this isn't a cop-out, I really don't know. I believe that they are real. I believe that Rolex made them, but I think there are a lot of fake ones out there.
Well, that's no doubt. This watch tends to be Frankenstein more than almost any other.
I mean, you're paying a significant premium for a bezel, right? And I think, some people really get into that, some people don't. Bezels aren't signed, which a lot of people may or may not know. So there's no Rolex signature on a bezel, so it's pretty easy to fake that. There's only a certain accepted serial range where a blueberry could be. So if you've taken the time to research that, my guess is that you're probably okay. But when you buy something like this, I'd really want to make sure it comes from the best sources possible.
Let it be a mystery.
That's right.
All I know is that I really like this piece. It tends to be a watch I wear a lot on a daily basis. I bought this when I was in Israel a few years ago. It's become this thing with me where when I travel, there are two things I look for: food and vintage watch dealers in countries. It's been fun for me to kind of learn about culture through what their antiques are and what their artifacts are, what they value, and the food that they eat, and watches are a part of that. And since we're talking about Rolex, one of my favorite pieces, it's a Big Eyes Daytona. First of all, I like the large subdials. I think that's really appealing. I like Panda dials. I also like it because it's not the typical Daytona.
Right, it doesn't in fact say Daytona anywhere on it.
Right, in that sense it feels a little bit more special to me, but the look of it is classic Daytona.
It really is.
It's the pushers and the screw down.
Everything's correct on that one. That is, yeah. I mean, big eye Daytonas, were only made for a very short period of time, and not for the entire period of time, just by one dial manufacturer. This would be far more compelling to me as a collector than like a 6241 or 6239 Paul Newman. I mean, this is a connoisseur's watch for sure.
And then we get to the kind of heavy hitter grail pieces, and these are more recent purchases. This is the 3700/1A. When I first started collecting, I didn't appreciate this watch. When you think Patek, you think the 5270s, you think the complications and all that. This is kind of an outlier when you look at the design, but I started to appreciate the symmetry of this watch and the simplicity of the dial. And now they have all sorts of complications, but I wanted just the plain.
The original.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for the original, the thing that sets the tone and everything else is based off of. Because of that, I started digging a little bit deeper and going into the APs.
If you have one, you kind of have to have the other.
They're companion pieces, I think.
They really are.
If you're lucky enough to even find one and be able to afford one, you're very fortunate, and I've been lucky enough to find two. So this is the 5402 A series. These two pieces are kind of hallmarks to me because they represent the first of their kind. I'm told that this is one of the first 1,000 produced, so...
Yeah, there's a number right on the back. It should tell you the number right there.
This says made in Taiwan, though. Is that a clue?
These two watches in particular, these are archetypes of the two hottest watches in the world right now. Maybe remove the Daytona from that or the Pepsi GMT, but like the 15202 modern Royal Oak and the 5711A, you can't get them. They're trading, the Nautilus in particular is trading for 3x retail at times, and this is the thing that started it all. So we're filming here in New York City, but you don't reside in New York City. So what are you doing in town?
There's a movie that I'm a part of called Always Be My Maybe, and it's a rom-com with Ali Wong and Randall Park. I have a very tiny part in it, but I love those guys so much. It was a movie that they conceived and co-wrote and produced and also acted in. And it's got as its leads two Asian Americans, and I thought, for everything this film stands for and who you are as people, I don't care what the role is, just sign me up.
Yeah.
And so I'm here doing some publicity for that. I'm on my way to Germany to start another project. I'll be doing a film with Anna Kendrick and Toni Collette, and in that film I play an astronaut, and I've already worked out that I'm going to be wearing an Omega Speedmaster
That's amazing.
on my wrist.
Are there many people in your world that are interested in watches, period? I know a mutual friend, Dave Park, is a big watch guy, but anybody else in your
Yeah,
world?
there are a handful, and like it's interesting to me because a lot of my friends who are not that financially well off are looking into starting to collect, and I find that super great and fascinating because I don't think there should be a barrier to entry to collecting. This notion that watch collecting is only for the rich is something I think is a myth.
And on that note, I would encourage everybody to go onto the vintage Seiko forums. I mean, it gets nuts on that. The enthusiasm around these watches, which are not terribly expensive, is just as real as there is around vintage Daytona. It's pretty wild stuff.
No, it's true. And even swatches. I have a chronograph swatch that I absolutely love, and I think in the magazine I talked about my G-Shock. And that's the other thing. Like now, when I think about rolls, I actually do think about what this character might wear. I actually wore a G-Shock in Hellboy. That was my own G-Shock.
No kidding.
Yeah, and my character is supposed to be a British military guy, so I thought about trying to find what was authentic to the British military of that time. So I found out that they were issued Omegas. I looked to try and source an Omega, but it was too short notice and I couldn't get one. And so I just went with the old G-Shock. Because of my relationship to watches from my dad, even when I was a kid, I remember saying, like, when I grow up, I'm going to collect watches. And I was in 2nd or 3rd grade.
It's wild.
And so to be able to be in a position to be lucky enough to collect pieces like this, I feel very, very fortunate. You know, my son just graduated from college and we were able to get him his first timepiece and we engraved it. And so hopefully I'm able to instill in him this idea of the symbolism that's contained in a watch.